There is something you need to understand about me before anything else. Before the story, before the details, before any of it. You need to understand what home means to a woman like me, because without that understanding, nothing that follows will make complete sense. Home is not a place I return to at the end of the day. Home is not a collection of furniture and walls and a familiar smell. Home is not even the people inside it, though the people are everything. Home for me is the thing I build from the inside out. The invisible architecture of safety that I construct slowly and deliberately around the people I love. The emotional structure that holds everything together. The warmth that I generate and maintain and tend to every single day without anyone asking me to, because it is the most natural expression of who I am. I am a builder of homes in the deepest sense of that word. And when you live inside something a woman like me has built for you, you are living inside the most essential part of her. You are living inside what she is made of. That is not a metaphor. That is the literal truth of what it means to be loved by a Cancer woman. I started building our home long before we had one. I built it in the small decisions. The way I learned exactly how he took his coffee and made it that way every morning without being asked. The way I remembered the name of every person who mattered to him and asked about them by name. The way I noticed when he was carrying something heavy before he said a word about it and created the space for him to put it down. I built it in the larger decisions too. In the way I arranged our shared life to be a place of softness and constancy. In the way I made sure that whatever was chaotic or difficult or unpredictable about the world outside, the space we shared would always be steady. Always warm. Always, unmistakably home. That is what I do. That is what I have always done. It is not a performance of love. It is love itself, expressed in the only language I have ever really been fluent in. We had been together for 4 years when I first noticed something wrong. 4 years of that building, that tending, that daily and unglamorous and completely sincere work of making a life feel safe and loved and worth coming back to. 4 years of being the person who held the emotional center of everything we were. And I want to be clear that I did not do any of it expecting a specific return. I did not build what I built in order to receive something equal in exchange. I built it because I cannot help building it. Because making a home for the people I love is as involuntary for me as breathing. Because a Cancer woman does not tend to the people she loves as a transaction, but as a vocation. But I will also tell you the truth, which is that after 4 years of giving everything I had to the warmth and safety of what we shared, the very last place I expected the danger to come from was inside it. It was a Saturday morning. I remember it the way I remember things that matter. Completely, with the kind of detail that only registers when your nervous system understands that what is happening is significant even before your conscious mind has caught up. I was in the kitchen. The particular quality of the morning light, the sound of the neighborhood outside, the smell of coffee already made. He was supposed to be asleep still. I was not looking for anything. I was not suspicious in any active way. There had been a low hum of something not quite right for a few weeks, a slight change in the texture of things that I had not yet allowed myself to examine directly, because examining it directly would have meant accepting the possibility of something I was not ready to accept. I was not looking for anything, and then I found something. Not because I searched, because the truth had stopped being careful about where it left itself. I sat down on the kitchen floor. I know that sounds like a strange detail, but it is what I remember most clearly. The feeling of the floor under me, cold and solid and real, and the way I sat there holding what I had found and just breathing. Not crying. Not yet. Just breathing and sitting and trying to locate myself inside what had just happened. Because that is the other thing you need to understand about a Cancer woman. The initial impact of a wound like this does not express itself immediately in the way people expect. We do not explode. We do not reach for our phones to call someone. We go inward. We go to the deep interior place where we process the things that are too large to be processed on the surface. We sit with them. we hold them. And in that holding, the full weight of what has happened makes itself known slowly, like something enormous rising from a great depth. What rose from the depth that morning was not just the pain of betrayal.
It was precisely the
I need you
inverse.
to understand that.
And that
Because if
distinction
you think what
changes
I
everything.
experienced was simply the pain of a relationship being broken, you are missing most of what
No.
actually happened.
This isn't how
Yes,
it ends.
the relationship was broken. Yes, the trust was broken. Yes, everything I had believed about who we were to each other was now something I
lost
had to
everything.
completely reevaluate. All of that was true,
I
and
will
all of
never
that
be the
hurt in
same.
ways that I will not minimize. But underneath all of that was something larger and stranger, and in some ways more devastating. What was broken was the home. The actual home. Not the building, but the thing I had spent 4 years constructing inside the building. The safety. The warmth. The inviolable sense that this space, this shared life, was the one place in the world where I did not have to be vigilant. The one place where the walls were down. The one place where I was fully myself, fully soft, fully present without armor. He had been inside that place. He had lived there, been held by it, been kept warm by everything I had built. And from inside that place, he had done this. That is the specific shape of the wound, not the betrayal in the abstract, the location of it. The fact that it happened here, in the space that was supposed to be sacred, in the place I had built to be safe. I got up from the floor eventually. I made more coffee. I moved through the morning with the automatic competence of someone who has done ordinary things so many times that the body knows how to do them without the mind being present. He came downstairs. I watched him move through the kitchen, watched him pour himself coffee, watched him sit at the table we had chosen together on a Sunday afternoon 2 years ago at a market neither of us had intended to visit. He looked the same as he always had. That was somehow the most disorienting part. That the person who had broken the most important thing I had ever built could stand in the middle of what he had broken and look completely unremarkable. Could pour coffee. Could look out the window. Could exist in the space with total ease while I was sitting across from him feeling the floor of everything shift beneath me. I did not say anything that morning. I am not someone who speaks before I am ready, and I was not ready. What I needed first was to understand the full shape of what had happened, to feel all the way to the edges of it, to know what I was actually dealing with before I opened my mouth. So I said nothing.
Good morning.
And he, not knowing what I knew, was simply himself. Easy and familiar and completely unaware that the woman sitting across from him had just watched the most important thing she had ever built quietly come apart at the seams. The days that followed were some of the strangest of my life. I moved through them performing a version of normalcy that I have never had to perform before. Because normalcy, for me, has never been a performance.
The exhaustion.
It has always been
Just trying
genuine,
to be okay
has always
feels
come
like
from
a
a real
performance
place
every
of
time.
stability and contentment and
I
love.
just want to stop.
Performing it was deeply unnatural and deeply exhausting in a way I had not anticipated. And what made it stranger still was that I was performing it inside the space I had built, inside the home that now felt like a place I no longer fully recognized. The furniture was the same. The light came through the windows the same way. The sounds of the neighborhood were the same. But the invisible architecture, the emotional structure that made it feel like home rather than just a place, that had been damaged in a way I was not yet sure was repairable. I moved through the rooms like someone walking through a place they used to love, noticing all the ways it is still familiar and feeling the wrongness of it anyway. I told him I knew on the 4th day. I waited that long, not because I was afraid of the conversation, but because I needed to be fully myself when it happened. Fully grounded, fully clear, fully in possession of everything I felt and everything I knew. I did not want to have that conversation from inside the shock of the first morning. I wanted to have it from inside my full strength. And when I finally did, I spoke from exactly there. From the deepest and most grounded part of myself, the part that does not waver, the part that is held steady through everything I have ever been through because it is built on something real. I told him what I knew. I told him how I knew it. And then I told him something that I think surprised him,
I'm sorry.
because it was not what he expected me to say first. I did not tell him how much he had hurt me.
You didn't tell me about
I
this.
did not tell him how angry I was, or how
I made this
betrayed I
home for
felt,
us.
or how long I
Every
had been
corner,
sitting alone
every
with what I had
piece,
found.
everything.
I
And you have
told him
no
what
right
he
to
had done
take
to
it
the
from me.
home.
For 4
I
years,
told
I
him that
built
this
this.
space,
I built
this
it
life
from
we had
nothing.
built together,
And
this
now,
specific and
you want to tell me
irreplaceable
it's worth
arrangement of
nothing?
trust and warmth and shared history, was not a backdrop to our relationship. It was the relationship. It was the thing I had poured myself into for 4 years.
I built all
It was
of
the most
this.
real expression of love I was capable of giving. And he had stood
I
inside
made
it and
this
treated
home.
it as though it did not matter,
The way
as
you
though I
just
had not
erased
built
it.
it, as though
The
it had simply
precise
always been there,
calculation in
like
your
air,
disregard.
requiring nothing and costing nothing
I
and therefore
see it
meaning
now.
nothing.
I
That was
have
what I
done
needed
the
him to
accounting.
understand.
Every
Not just
factor,
that he had hurt me,
every choice
but what,
leads here.
specifically,
Do you
he had
understand
broken.
that?
He cried. I watched him cry, and I felt something that I am still not sure I haven't named.
I knew.
Something that
I
was
never
not
meant
quite
to hurt you.
compassion and not quite distance, but something in between the two. Something that my love for him produced even now.
I
Even
never
in this
stopped loving
moment,
you.
because love does not turn off for
Not
a
for a
cancer
single
woman simply
day.
because it has been wounded.
And that is my curse.
That is one of the hardest things about being who I am. The love stays even when everything that supported it has been damaged. It stays and it aches, and it makes every decision harder than it would be if I were built differently. I held him while he cried. I know that sounds impossible
wish you
under the
hadn't done this.
circumstances.
But I held him because in that moment he was in pain, and I am someone who
I'm so
responds to
sorry.
pain in people I love with
I'm
presence
here.
rather than
I'm
withdrawal.
listening.
Even
I
then,
know.
even
We'll
there.
get through this.
That is just the
Take a
truth of
moment.
who I am. But holding him was not the same as deciding to stay. And I need to make that distinction clearly because I think the people who know me, who have watched me love and forgive and tend and hold, might assume that because I held him in that moment I had already decided to try again. I had not decided anything in that moment. I was simply being who I am. Present with someone in pain. While a completely separate part of me was sitting quietly with a much larger and more difficult question. The question of whether what had been broken could be rebuilt. Not the relationship. The relationship was something I could imagine reconstructing, painfully and slowly, if the conditions were right. But the home. That invisible architecture of safety that I had built
I'm not
over
sure
4
if I can do
years,
this.
and that had been damaged from the inside. Could that be rebuilt?
Do you really think there's a
Could
way
a
back
place
from
that had
this?
been broken in that specific
A
way
true
ever
way,
feel safe again in the
without
way it had
losing
felt safe
everything?
before? Could I ever be fully
I just
soft
need you
here
to tell
again,
me, is it
fully
completely
without
gone?
armor, fully home, the way I was before I knew what I now knew? I thought about that question for a long time. Weeks. I stayed during those weeks. Stayed in the space, stayed in the relationship, stayed present and functioning, and outwardly much the same as I had always been, while internally I was doing the most serious accounting of my life. Weighing things that cannot really be weighed. Measuring things that resist measurement. Trying to determine whether the structure of what we had was damaged in a way that could be repaired or damaged in a way that only looked repairable from the outside while something essential had already been lost. Here is what I discovered during those weeks. I discovered that I was doing something I had never done before in my own home. I was being careful. Not careful in the way you are careful in an unfamiliar place, but careful in the way you are careful in a place that has proved itself unsafe. I was monitoring myself, checking my own openness, maintaining a small internal distance that had not been there before, keeping some part of me held back in a way that was completely foreign to my nature. I was, in the most fundamental sense, no longer fully at home. And I understood, with a clarity that arrived quietly and without drama, that this was not something I could simply decide to change. It was not a habit I could break or a perspective I could shift with effort and intention. It was a response, a real and involuntary response to a real thing that had happened. The safety was gone. Not because I had decided to withdraw it, but because it had been taken, and that taking could not be undone simply by wanting it undone. The decision, when it finally came, did not feel like a decision in the way decisions usually feel. Like something chosen from among alternatives, like a fork in the road where you select a direction and commit to it. It felt more like an arrival. Like I had been walking toward something for a long time and had finally arrived at the place I had been walking toward all along. I was going to leave. Not in anger, not in retaliation, not in a storm of hurt and accusation. I was going to leave because the home was gone.
I understand what I'm leaving.
Because the most important thing I had
And I
ever built in
understand
this
why I have
space
to
had been
go.
damaged beyond what I was
There is
capable
no
of
path
repairing.
back.
And staying inside the damage was slowly dismantling the part of me that knows how to build homes in the first place. And that part of me, the builder, the tender, the woman who makes warmth from nothing and safety from love, that part was not something I was willing to sacrifice for anyone. Not even for someone I had loved as completely as I had loved him. I left on a Sunday. I chose Sunday deliberately, though I could not have fully explained why at the time. Sundays had always been our best days. Slow and domestic and full of the ordinary pleasures of a shared life, the kind of day that exists purely inside the home rather than in the world outside it. Leaving on a Sunday felt right in a way I understood only later. It was a way of acknowledging what had been real. A way of saying that the thing we had built here mattered, that the Sundays had been true, that the home had been real before it was broken. I was not leaving what we had been. I was leaving what it had become. And there is an important difference between those two things that I needed to honor. I took what was mine. The objects that carried memory. Not
It
because
belongs
memory is
here,
property,
with me.
but because memory is care. And I had generated most of the care in that space, and I was entitled to carry it with me. I left what was his. I left the space clean and orderly because I am incapable of leaving chaos behind me even when chaos has been handed to me. Because that is simply who I am and who I will always be regardless of what someone has done to me. I said goodbye without cruelty and without performance. And then I left the home that I had built, carrying inside me the knowledge of what I was capable of building, and began to look for the next place where I would build again. Because that is the thing about a Cancer woman that I need you to understand before we finish.
What you were doing.
You can break what she built. You
And
can
now
damage
we
it
have
from
to
the
face it.
inside, from the place of greatest
saw the
trust,
truth of
in the
it,
most painful
the
way
place it was
possible.
born. I
You
see
can
it
do the
now,
one thing she was completely
and there is nothing
unprepared
left to
for.
say.
You can take the home she made for you and make it feel unsafe. But you cannot take from her the ability to make it. The
I have
building
found that
is
my
not in the
truth
structure.
lies not in what I built,
It is in
but in
her.
what lives here, within me.
It is in the warmth
untouchable
she
and
generates
forever.
without effort,
There is
and the
something
love
within
she
us
gives
that is
without
innate,
conditions, and the instinct she
capacity
has
that
for turning
cannot be
any
touched,
space into a place
cannot
where the
be
people she
broken.
loves feel held.
You will do this,
You can destroy what she made for you. You cannot touch
because
what she
there is
is.
no other way.
And what she is will find a new space and new people and begin again. The way she always has, the way she always will. Building something you will spend the rest of your life understanding you were not worthy of keeping. The home I make next will be built more carefully, not more fearfully. I refuse to let fear be the architect of anything I create, but more carefully. With a greater attention to the foundations.
Care going forward
With a more
looks like
honest
integrating
assessment of
everything
who
we've
deserves to
learned,
live inside
building
what
on
I
our
build.
strengths, and
With a
creating
clearer
supportive
understanding
environment
of
for
the
everyone.
difference between someone who values what I create and someone who simply consumes it without ever really seeing it. That distinction matters. It always mattered. I just needed to learn it the hard way. The way Cancer women sometimes learn the most important things.
You learn
Not from
not
observation,
from a
but
distance,
from living fully
but
inside
from
the
full
experience until the
immersion.
lesson becomes impossible to
That's
miss.
just my nature.
What happened when you betrayed my home was this.
You need to know
You did not
this.
just break a relationship. You broke the safest place
I'm
I had
not
ever
gonna
made.
pretend anymore.
You damaged something that
You
took
took the
years
best
to
years I
build
had,
and cannot
not
be
just the
rebuilt in the
time,
same
but the
place.
trust, the
With the
joy,
same
the
materials,
future I
for the same
envisioned.
person.
You knew exactly what you were doing.
You made me careful in a space where I had been completely open. And in doing so, you lost the most real and the most complete version of what I had to give.
Trust
Not
is the
because I
weight
chose
of
to
all you
withhold it,
carry.
but because
And where it
home for a woman
goes,
like me is
it
made
leaves
of
a
trust.
void that nothing
And
else
trust,
can
once
fill.
broken from the inside, does not return to the place where it was broken. It goes somewhere else. It goes somewhere new. It goes somewhere it has reason to believe it will be safe. And I promise you,
I will find that place. I always do.